Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation, Meeting Change, How 2 LINC Programs Pivoted Successfully in Pandemic Times. We're going to be recalling those first few months of the pandemic when we spent sleepless nights trying to figure out how we were going to continue supporting our clients amidst all the uncertainties and worries about health and safety. We'll share our experiences and highlight the resilience and passion of the hundreds of staff and students involved. Our hope is that by sharing, we will contribute to the collective learning that the sector has done and is continuing to do as we look to the future. Today, I am thrilled to be sharing this opportunity with our colleagues, Setsu Kawahara and Anthony Caldwel, supervisors for the language services at ISANS, as well as Astrid Vanderpoel, instructional developer for online learning at MOSAIC. And my name is Diana Ospina, Senior Manager of the Language Programs at MOSAIC. First of all, Astrid and I are in Vancouver, and we would like to acknowledge that we live and work on the traditional and unceded lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and that we reflect in our practice MOSAIC's commitment to moving forward in a spirit of reconciliation and respect.
For those of us from Nova Scotia, we acknowledge that we are on the unceded traditional Mi'kmaq territory, and we are grateful for the peace and friendship treaties. At ISANS, as we work to settle newcomers to Nova Scotia, we honor and respect the Indigenous people of this land. I'll turn it over to Setsu to speak next.
Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. My name is Setsu Kawahara. I'm a language supervisor at ISANS. It is a privilege to be here with MOSAIC today to talk about our response to the pandemic. As we move through the presentation, we will be talking about, from the perspective of each organization, our pre-pandemic experiences with online program delivery, what happened when we all had to pivot in mid-March, and finally, what we have learned and what we continue to learn from our experiences and how this learning will inform our plans for programming moving forward. First, we are going to give a very brief overview of our organizations. Tony, tell us about ISANS.
Thank you, Setsu. ISANS stands for Immigrant Services Association of Nova Scotia, and we are the leading deliverer of settlement services in Atlantic Canada. We're kind of one-stop shop for newcomer services in Nova Scotia, providing settlement, employment, business development, and of course, language services to our newcomers to Atlantic Canada. Our mission is to help immigrants to build a future in Nova Scotia, and our vision is to be a community where all can belong and grow. Setsu, I'll turn it back over to you for the next slide.
Thank you. Within our language services team, we also have a wide variety of programs to serve the needs of newcomers to Nova Scotia. A few were already in a position to continue without pause into the pandemic. For the others, online was a whole new world. In my part of the presentation, I'm going to address the lower level programs with some of our most vulnerable learners.
So MOSAIC is one of the largest nonprofit settlement organizations in BC. We provide services to immigrant, refugee, migrant, and mainstream communities in the Metro Vancouver and Fraser Valley regions, as well as overseas via online programming. We serve over 20,000 clients annually, and we are community leaders committed to the economic, social, cultural development of Canada. And we work with over 1,000 employers and sit at 43 community tables, task groups, and committees. We provide a client-centered approach in over 35 programs and services, including innovative programs for women, families, youth, seniors, LGBTQ, and migrant workers. We have been providing government-funded language training with childminding for over 30 years and have been providing online training in various forms since 2009. Okay, so now that you've seen just how involved in the community and diverse the programming is at ISANS and MOSAIC, we'll share our experience with online learning environments. This will give you a sense of what fed our resilience during our pivot. Astrid, can you tell us about MOSAIC's online journey?
In 2009, MOSAIC began a blended English for the workplace class. The blended model lets busy working people study at convenient times and also gives them the support of a face-to-face class. In 2014, all MOSAIC LINC classes got a parallel Moodle online class, and this did two things. One, it enabled the teachers to learn about Moodle. We had an OLC basics class that was mandatory and taught instructors how to unenroll, add activities, and use Moodle. And the second thing it did was it enabled students to learn about our tools, prepare for assessments, repeat material they struggled with. So the online class at that time was used for homework for the students and with a laptop cart sometimes in the classroom. Since our development team created OLC learning objects and they modeled best practices for e-learning with copyright, images, font size, and since 2014, MOSAIC has also been offering a blended classes to higher level LINC clients. Blended instructors were our experienced expert mentors, and at that time, I think the other instructors varied a lot. Some became extremely proficient with Moodle, and some didn't really use the class a whole heck of a lot. We recognized that many learners needed digital literacy training, and we also had a digital literacy training sessions for students in 2019. And we had the development team created TBLs that were shared on Tutela, and MOSAIC also built connections with the sector through BC Teal and sector tables and other communities of practice. And our organization also had a strong culture of learning and sharing of materials. And now we'll hear from ISANS about their experience. Tony, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Thank you, Astrid. So ISANS has a significant history in blended and online learning, but primarily targeted at higher level language classes and in the area of workplace English. So we had blended sector specific classes going back many years and fully online static skill specific courses that enabled our clients to work on very specific targeted language goals. Our focus had been to create and implement highly polished but very static courses overall, which was really good for meeting these specific goals, but not really as applicable to the dynamic classroom environment that most of our language for New Canadian or LINC classes need to have to be effective. We have a long-standing relationship with New Language Solutions, abbreviated on this slide as NLS, and we had been providing our instructors the opportunity to take New Language Solutions Stage 1 training, introduction to their learning management system, EduLink, which is now avenue.ca, for many years, but we had only just started to pilot this in the classroom, in the LINC classrooms, in the lead up to what would become the COVID closures. We had started to bring a few classes along and help our instructors and our clients both to make the adjustment from the traditional on-site class delivery to a blended model, which we had been planning to incrementally implement through 2019, 2020, and 2021. I'll turn it over now to Satsu to speak a little bit to how this was with our lower level language classes at ISANS.
Thank you. Well, it certainly is a little bit. For us in the lower levels, including literacy classes, our seniors, our deaf clients, and our accessibility support program clients, we had virtually, pun intended, almost no experience at all with online learning. Digital literacy was extremely low. There was very little access to personal technology for our learners, and we had little opportunity to practice because we had such low capacity for accessing computer labs. We were only able to get in about twice a month. So if you had tasked me with putting our learners exclusively online in February of 2020, I would have told you that it couldn't be done.
Thank you, Tony and Setsu. So that was a summary of where we were in March 2020, and these are the challenges that we encountered back then. The big challenge was the lack of time. At MOSAIC and ISANS, we were accustomed to rolling out projects and programs that involved development, pilots, evaluations, and sufficient time for training. This time we wanted to be up and running with as little disruption to the students as possible. This was so they could maintain their connection to the community and also have a source of reliable pandemic information. The hurdles we had to get over were coming up with a delivery model that made sense for the students we served and took advantage of the experience that we had. For us, as for many in the sector, that meant a remote teaching model. In our previous experience with blended models, which were part face-to-face and part online, we had seen how the right combination of task-based content mixed with that important sense of being part of a community kept students engaged. To keep this going, this meant that we would have to significantly increase the content in the online learning environment and make sure it was as user-friendly as possible, including for levels that we hadn't considered taken online before. It also meant guiding both instructional staff and students on how to meet online. So we had to put effective and efficient training in place for our customized approaches, which took into account issues of staff and student digital literacy, accessibility, and of course, all the issues of confidentiality that come along with this sort of program. We launched our remote learning projects in mid-April and have been learning and adjusting ever since. I just want to highlight the use of the term remote learning as a recognition that we implemented several ideas that used lo-fi solutions such as phones, mailouts, and study packages. Tony, can you speak to how ISANS met these challenges?
So without experience in delivering on-site classes in a fully online environment, we had to quickly come up with two frameworks, one for higher level classes and one for lower level classes. And within the framework for the higher level classes, we actually further had to address the difference in accessibility for those in the CLB 3-4 range and those that were studying at the CLB 5+. So we could leverage some lessons that we had learned from our experience in piloting the blended learning classes with our CLB 5+ classes. And we also learned a lot of good practices that were shared by other SPOs like MOSAIC. And thank you very much, MOSAIC, for all your help and advice during the lead up to and in this time. You know, these collaborations between staff and between SPOs, really one of the major ways that we were able to continue and pivot so quickly, continue service to our clients and pivot so quickly. Also, something that Astrid had referred to earlier, the culture of learning amongst our staff and in our organizations were great keys to that success. So when we actually created the new online versions of our on-site classes, at the higher levels, we could use EduLink, which now is avenue.ca. At the mid-range level, we created a virtual classroom environment similar to EduLink, but much less content rich in order to make sure that it was accessible to clients with lower levels of reading, and also to help our instructors who were new to online learning navigate the intricacies of Moodle and build up to more advanced and more technically difficult content as they progressed in using these platforms. So these are the new uncluttered dynamic courses within our LMS that's referred to here on this slide. We tried a number of different communication tools to see what would work in the early days, and had follow-up and collaboration sessions amongst our instructors, and settled on Zoom for the classroom environment. We do have a few other options that are available in special cases, but for the most part, we use Zoom for on-site meetings, which we continue to maintain with the clients every day in these classes. The difference, of course, is that using Zoom for prolonged periods of time is a challenge for clients as much as it is for instructors themselves. So we limited the synchronous portion of the class each day to what was needed, and assigned more of the work in asynchronous learning, which gave the clients more flexibility as well. For the EduLink, which became Avenue platform, that has been and continues to be a great solution for our LINC classes with its ready-made materials and national scope, as well as its associated and now integrated teacher training system, Learn IT to Teach. It allows us to not only plan our classes locally and collaborate locally, but also to collaborate with other instructors using this platform and these resources across Canada. It has left us a little bit with a foot in each of two worlds, having this simplified internal LMS virtual classroom and the use of the avenue.ca platform, which situation which we are looking at and would like to remedy in the future. As I mentioned earlier, we tapped continuously throughout into the organizational culture of continuous learning, and the way the staff came together to make this pivot possible is really, really remarkable. You know, our clients suffered from a lot of the issues that all of us have suffered through with the shutdowns and sometimes lockdowns in our communities, and to be able to continue service to them during that time was really, really important for them. Our staff rapidly undertook and completed training that was required to use these new tools, and have continued to collaborate and expand upon good practices and identified best practices, both within ISANS and across the sector in Canada. There have definitely been bumps along the road, and there are still issues to work out in delivering face-to-face classes, well, formally face-to-face classes online. But the staff has done a great job of embracing new technology and finding ways to continue to provide these services. So now I'm going to turn it over to Setsu to speak to the other part of our new approach that we developed during the pivot during COVID times for the lower level language classes. Setsu, over to you.
Thank you, Tony. Well, with such low digital literacy and lack of technology in their homes and very limited language abilities, we leveraged what we thought that the learners could access relatively easily. So they have been using WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger to communicate with their instructors. So they communicate twice a week for about 15 or 20 minutes each time. It seems like very little, but you can imagine every instructor communicating with each and every learner twice a week is a really heavy workload and creates a lot of screen fatigue for our instructors. During the calls, they are working on a bi-monthly homework package that initially was mailed to the learners, but now we have, with relatively low numbers, thankfully, the learners are now coming on site to pick up their homework packages. Within these homework packages, within the phone calls, they review the homework packages and they practice their speaking and listening, of course, and reading. And they get the added bonus of having some communication with their instructor. The homework packages that we create for the learners now every 3 weeks, as opposed to every 2, contain thematic books, complementary language activities, phonics, zones of regulation material to help them address their feelings and mental health, and of course the COVID-related information and protocols that relate directly to what's happening here in their community. We have progressed, we did progress in November for a short time and then actually shut back down again, but reopened in January. We do have a limited number of face-to-face classes with an online component, and the homework packages continue with those classes as well. Zoom was introduced to the CLB2 classes only when we started delivering online services. It took a while to get there, but they are all successfully using Zoom now. And just this month, we're trying to get our CLB1s and a few of the higher level literacy classes on board. We provide, and we introduced and still provide, tech support sessions to support learners that are struggling with their technology. So whether it's their WhatsApp or their Facebook Messenger, or learning how to take pictures of their homework to send to their instructors, or how to navigate their screens. We have a dedicated instructor who is on site who will meet with the learners one-on-one to help them with that technology so that they can continue with their learning. We also implemented orientation sessions again in November for the lower levels to fill classes. This included orientation to the technology that they would need to be using in classes, as well as the class routine and what needs to be done around the homework packages. So as an update, we now have most classes thankfully filled back up to capacity, and our orientation sessions continue to go strong, and more learners are availing themselves of the tech support sessions on site to strengthen their digital literacy skills and move forward with their language learning. We have physical distancing here still in Nova Scotia of 2 meters, so that restricts the number of learners that can come in for orientation. So it's a slow process, but we're really pleased that it's been so successful. And we have also been able to start teaching our learners about the accessibility features, which makes learning a little bit easier for them on some devices like phones and tablets and Chromebooks. So Diana, over to you.
Great, thank you, Setsu. Part of MOSAIC's pivot was to consider the needs of clients and admin staff as well as instructors. For the clients, we wanted to support early and support often despite our staff working remotely. We mobilized the technical resources that we had in place and worked to fill in the gaps as quickly as we could. So for example, we had to start using virtual phone lines, and we hadn't had virtual personal networks, so we implemented those. We did things like password protecting our files to maintain the privacy and confidentiality of clients. We ran countless orientations led by instructors and a small but mighty contingent of volunteers. Our volunteers also supported our lower level Zoom class sessions. I have to say that I was also incredibly impressed with what the work our early childhood educators were doing. They decided to go with Facebook, as it was the tool that their clients were using. And they came up with wonderful learning modules and supplemented them with videos. And later on, when things opened up a little more in in January, they were creating learning kits that parents were able to come and pick up so that our littlest clients could continue to access the important enrichment activities which our childcare services provide. In terms of support from the organization, MOSAIC, not unlike what ISANS may have had to do, had to fast forward our technology plans and put things like Teams in place. We re-imaged and set up any and all spare computers that we could find so staff could work remotely. And specifically for the LINC program, while our instructional developer teams were supporting the instructors, the admin team was working on finding remote learning procedures for registration and onboarding, as well as implementing and regularly reviewing safety plans for the long-awaited date when we could finally come back on site. Astrid, could you tell us about the supports for the instructors?
Our instructor support began by selecting 2 tools, and we chose Moodle for the OLC and for the asynchronous work, and Zoom for the synchronous class time. And then we shaped our PD around those 2 tools. We had Zoom trainings, videos, cheat sheets, for using the features of Zoom, and we had kind of training sessions to help get used to and get comfortable with it all. And then we outlined the ways that the Zoom synchronous time could be structured. And it actually created a few opportunities for us to think about that, because we could have Zoom for the whole class, the half class, small groups, one-on-one teacher office hours. And then instructional developers also created some expectations for remote learning for both the students and the teachers. And these were things just to keep, I think sometimes when we're adjusting to new tools, we kind of forget our core practices, and we kind of, the cheat sheets help to remind the teachers of, keep with the PBLA and keep with your building relationships with the students, and kind of a reminder of best practices. We also rebuilt our teacher room. So our teacher room is a space in our Moodle environment that all the teachers have access to, and it's divided into different sections. We have one section on OLC basics, and in here you will see how to enroll, unenroll students in their classes, and to do basic things like add images. There's kind of a bit more sophisticated sections on creating OLC content, managing OLC content. For creating OLC content, we have things like how to make a page, how to make an assignment, what to do with Moodle books, how to load videos properly so that you don't get the advertising, what are best practices for teaching forums. And there's actually been some research at MOSAIC about how to use forums and what is the best practices for giving feedback in the forum. So there's, in our teacher class, we will have some examples of how to reply to a forum using kind of just different color ink to give feedback, and how to correct the grammar, and even some kind of strategies for making it a little less onerous for the teachers, because there's a lot of work in that kind of correction. We also, in our rebuild of the teacher room and in our training sessions, we had experienced blended instructors create sample lesson plans to demonstrate sample weekly schedules to show how synchronous and asynchronous activities flow together or work together, because we were trying to figure everything out. And the blended teachers had a lot of experience moving from using the OLC in a more kind of flipped way with the videos or the listening or the content, and then moving into using the class time and the Zoom time for more conversation and for more kind of how to connect with the students. Part of our instructional support in as we entered into our fully online time was to have our development team and our instructors work together to create materials for our online class. Our online class used to be just for supplemental. It was an extra that our teachers had that they could use in their class, but they didn't need to. And so it was kind of just something in the background, but it had to move from becoming it was no longer supplemental at that time. It had to become kind of the backbone of the teaching and learning for the students. So our team created support materials. It created some material for COVID-19 health information. They created interactive activities for how to discuss for the pandemic and for kind of the changes that the students were encountering in their lives. One of the forums was about what was your life pre-pandemic and what is your life now, and how have your routines changed? And the students could really connect to each other using those kind of asynchronous space. And all of this was supplemented by, we supplemented it by webinars from Tutela, Learn IT to Teach webinars. We had level working groups where the teachers could connect and plan things together and kind of look through the materials and think about how they wanted to go about teaching. We also had our instructional developers check in with each teacher. So this means the teacher supervisor just called each teacher to see, how are you feeling about this move to fully online and what's going on for you? Because for some teachers, for example, this stage 2 blended teachers, the move online was effortless almost. They had a sense of how to use all the materials, how to, what resources were available, and kind of how to structure their environments. But for the lower level teachers, they basically almost felt like they would just move their regular class onto Zoom, and they didn't necessarily know how to use the OLC. So I think just checking in with the teachers and calling them and finding out where are you at and how can we support you, and connecting the blended teachers to the less experienced teachers to help them come up with a framework. So how would you go about it, and brainstorming together and drawing on the experience of our experienced teachers. I think those are some of the things that we did to create support for the instructors. We've also collected some feedback, and we've visited the Zoom classes to talk to the students, and it's been very interesting, and the students are very grateful to study during the pandemic. They think it's great to keep busy and to keep learning. Like all of us, they're a bit starved for social interaction, and so having this core group of people that you're seeing every day is very meaningful in this time. So they think it's really great to be busy and to keep learning, and the flexibility was especially great when the children were at home, and they were appreciative of the attention to health and safety that studying online provides. And we have some quotes. Online studying helped me a lot during the pandemic. I've been looking forward to Zoom classes every day. I'm grateful that the school continues to help me through online learning during this special time. And they appreciate their teacher and say thank you for everything. Or I would like to thank MOSAIC for online class and for helping us during the time of COVID-19. They've helped me very much, and I made progress in my English. And again, a thank you to the teacher who they love so much, and they are making good progress. And so I think this call to, so we are also saying that this call to the teacher, and I think this is one of the things that we need to remember as we reflect on this move to online learning and what has worked and what is going well, is this sense of connection, the sense of having a strong teacher presence in the class and building an excellent community and a feeling of safety and community for the students. Our clients have said 93% are saying the online class is helping them learn English. But back to this idea of community, I think that I've seen some very beautiful examples of how community can be built in the online class. One example was a Zoom cooking show where the students had a whole row of glass dishes, for example, a bowl of saffron or a bowl of onions and a bowl of berries. And she gave really excellent instructions about how to cook a meal. And I think another example is the Zoom breakout conversations. The teachers are putting students into the breakout rooms and they're having a chance to talk about different things. Some examples of conversation successes are things like, so what's your story? Or what's the most interesting thing you've done recently? Nice broad questions that are easy to answer. I've also seen success with Zoom movie clubs or Zoom book reviews. And in the asynchronous, I think the forums have been a really great sense of connection for the students. And I've also seen in their classes kind of a sharing space where students can post their photos, they can share MP3s, they share recipes. So these are some kind of successes that we've seen with that building of community that I think is important in the online class. And what's been happening recently, we've been checking kind of the OLC usage, and we've noticed that for Lit to CLB2, there's 5 times more usage than there was pre-pandemic. For CLB3 and 4, there's 7 times more usage than pre-pandemic. And for 3 and 4, there's 3.5 more times. So that just means that probably the stage 2 teachers were using it already. So, but the lower levels, there's been a lot of uptake in using it. We're still learning more about what works for the lower levels. Some things, there's not as many resources for Moodle or for H5P available for the lower levels. There's still work to be done to figure out how to build beautiful objects for these levels. So I think there's still just more work to be done. We have a bit of a chart on what has been working in our OLC.
Right. And just Astrid, before I go on to the next slide, I forgot to mention that we do welcome your questions, and thank you for the questions that have been coming in. Please feel free to send in some more questions. We will be having the Q&A session after our presentation, so we do welcome those questions. And Astrid, let me get you over to the next slide here.
So these are just some of the things that have been working well in our Moodle platform. So we had 26 instructors answer the question of what is working well. And H5Ps, which are the interactive learning objects that we can build now with videos and fill in the blank exercises, audios. They're just very versatile objects. They're very popular. The teachers still really like listening with questions, and forums are very popular. And we're getting quite a few requests recently for quizzes, which are really good for assessments. And we ask our teachers how comfortable they were with Moodle, and 1 being not very confident and 5 being very confident, and they said 4.42. So I guess they're feeling pretty comfortable using it. And one other, I think, success that that has happened, I think, is that, or one other I guess, takeaway from this time is about flexible PD. We had the Settlement Sector and Technology Task Force, which was managed by AMSA and funded by IRCC, say that training should move beyond conferences and full-day PDs. And I think that we've had quite a bit of success with short, flexible PDs. So, for example, Lunch and Learns for H5P, or short, even 5-minute instructional videos for particular points on Moodle in our teacher room. And those can be very self-directed, and the teacher can go there when they need to do something or just learn something quickly. Tony and Setsu, can you tell us about ISANS and update us on recent lessons and client feedback?
Thanks, Astrid. Yes, we've had a lot of feedback from clients, as you can see on the screen here, through the pivot to the online delivery using the structures that I spoke to before, the overall structure I spoke to before. We were able to maintain high levels of participation. And this participation also is due not only to the structure itself and the support that the instructors have given, but also to the additional supports for the learners provided by our online mentors and our head instructors. Our head instructors designed new orientations for the CLB 3 and 4 level, the ones that had the most challenge. We already had an orientation structure designed by our online mentors and our piloting instructors at the CLB 5+. And I'll leave it to Setsu to speak more about the orientation structure that they had that they developed at Literacy 1 and 2. But without these supports for clients, as well as the supports for instructors, we wouldn't have been as successful as we were at continuing that engagement and re-engaging them. In fact, we found that through the COVID-enforced online delivery, that there is a cohort of learners that really took to online learning and opened up in classes in a way that they had not before. Either the attendance became more consistent, or their participation became in activities and learning programs became more consistent, or both. I think this indicates that in the delivery of services, we have to update our thinking and update our approaches, be much more flexible and much faster in response than we have been in the past. There's certainly a place for this kind of program delivery, and an indication that there are other effective means just beginning to be explored by these different institutions and by the initiatives brought forward by instructors, by head instructors, by supervisors, that should all be part of our constellation of language services. So I'm going to turn it now over to Setsu to speak a little bit more about our literacy and lower language level classes.
Thank you, Tony. Well, within the lower levels, we are just in the process now of organizing some focus groups to get our learners' feedback on the kind of unique way that we are delivering language services to this vulnerable group. With the majority of our classes still learning online, this is a bit of a daunting task, as the focus groups are going to almost 100% be done with interpretation. But we do get a lot of anecdotal feedback from our, from the learners to our instructors. And it's mixed, to be honest. Our instructors are screen fatigued, of course, as they spend almost all day meeting their learners one-on-one. But they are actually also energized by the enthusiasm, the commitment, and progress of their learners. The learners have gained so much confidence that is visibly apparent. The majority are happy and thriving, and they enjoy as has been mentioned before, the flexibility of the online program. But they also admit to missing their classmates and the face-to-face interaction with their instructors. Orientations as well have very enthusiastic participants. They have so few options available to them that language acquisition is really, really important. So they are coming to orientation with a lot of, as I said, enthusiasm and commitment to learning the technology so that they can partake. Tony, I think you were going to speak a little bit about the impact on outcomes.
Yeah, thank you, Setsu. So we had quite an extensive survey of staff concerning our pivot to service delivery online during the closure. And out of that, of course, the previous slide was a collection of some of the data gathered in that survey, along with feedback from clients. But one question that stood out to me was a question about the perceived impact on program outcomes. And we've included here the results of that question by the numbers on the left and some quotes that people further elaborated in their responses on the right here. The reason I find that this question and its outcomes are particularly interesting is because it's not linear. You see that three of the options were a kind of linear scale: improved, decreased, stayed the same, basically a better, worse, or the same, but also changed completely. And I think there's a lot in that change completely to explore and think about going forward, that we're not just trying to replace A with B, but rather that there is this way and there is that way, and there might be a lot of things to look at in each of these areas. What may work for some clients may not work for other clients in this way or in that way. And thinking about change completely, what does that mean for our program planning, for our service delivery, and how are those changes reflecting our outcomes for our clients? I think these move us forward in unexpected ways and possibly very helpful directions. That's all. I'll turn it over to you.
Well, interestingly, ISANS as a whole is currently involved in a large evaluation of our organization's responses to the pandemic. So not just language services, but all the other teams as well. It's funded by the Child and Youth Refugee Coalition, and our group, I'm a part of this group, with the guidance and support of external researchers. We're looking at our response, our pivot to providing services online, evaluating what practices have been successful and where we can improve in the future. To date, we have surveyed our staff, our management team, our senior leadership team, our clients, and our external partners. So we are extremely excited for the outcomes of this evaluation and anticipate a stronger and more efficient program delivery in the future.
Great, so I believe I'm next here, so thank you, Setsu. So we've shared how ISANS and MOSAIC met the challenges brought on by the pandemic and our journey over the last 11 months. I can't believe it. So here are some of the lessons that we learned or things that stand out for us. I, for one, found the information sharing amongst different language training providers to be invaluable. Being able to take advantage of working remotely, we've been able to send more staff to attend conferences, workshops, different meetings, focus groups, etc., that have allowed us to learn from each other and give us inspiration to keep improving our programming. It would be so wonderful if we would be able to tap into what all of you have learned as well. I'm sure there's so much that we can glean from what we've done. And I think maintaining these meaningful networks allows us to recommend resources and cross-promote programs, share training materials and the sector intel, all towards making sure that we provide those services that are so important for our clients and learners. So I believe that this has helped us to avoid reinventing the wheel, although that being said, sometimes it's, we have to do things when we need them. So that did happen a little bit, but we did see some efficiencies with all of these connections that we've been making. So I hope that we'll be able to keep these sorts of virtual elements in our networking going forward, because I think a blended approach, being face-to-face with these maybe conferences and having these virtual sessions as well, are going to be able to allow us to hear more voices and more approaches. And that can only work towards improving all of our work. Another thing I'd like to do is just recognize that, while we are celebrating all the work that has gone into going online and figuring out how to do that, we can't forget that many of our clients and some of our colleagues don't have equitable access to reliable and affordable internet, and hope that governments at all levels will realize that this is a barrier to full participation in society, not just our programming. And that's really come to light with the whole pandemic and everything being shut down. So I think it's very important that the governments at all levels make provisions for fair access. Setsu?
Thank you, Diana. Well, for me, it has been a huge eye-opening experience to realize that our most vulnerable learners can make this incredible pivot to an online format. The acquisition of digital literacy skills, primarily independently, was incredibly motivating, instilling self-confidence and pride for our learners. We can't let this new skill be lost by returning to a completely face-to-face classroom scenario when safe to do so. We noticed counterintuitively that many learners thrived actually in a one-on-one lesson situation. They were freed from a lack of confidence, social anxieties, deferring to gender, family and work obligations, etc. It was truly wonderful to see. However, these lower learners need both. They need the digital literacy skills, so essential in 2020, 2021 and beyond, but also the opportunity to interact with their peers and their community to foster integration into Canadian society. Another quick acknowledgement has to be made to the instructors who pivoted with them. They have been exemplary. Moving forward, we need to ensure adequate training and time to collaborate and adapt to change. Astrid?
Sure. The pandemic has changed how we live, work, and teach. This new learning is both exciting and daunting. In my experience, LINC professionals are intelligent, deeply committed, soulful practitioners who have excellent teaching and relationship building skills. We need to ensure that this is brought with us into the new digital e-learning environment. We need resilient, supportive communities of practice. We need to check in with staff and clients and meet them where they're at. I love how the teachers are connecting to students through the photo sharing, the cooking lessons, the forum writing, but they need safe spaces for sharing and learning. Teachers who have taught for 20 years are now beginners, figuring out how to build an H5P. Instructors are creating wonderful learning objects and systems, but they need spaces for sharing, not only in our organization, but sector-wide. We will also need to establish best practices for e-learning research, and it'll be important to make deep, educated choices as we go forward. How about you, Tony?
Thanks, Astrid. One area highlighted for me was the need to pivot and adapt. Some existing conditions helped our staff and our clients to do this successfully, such as organizational commitment to ongoing learning, and which is embraced by staff, existing supports for clients to increase digital literacy. Some new conditions helped us to adapt, such as enhanced support for clients coming into programs, new orientations for clients in the literacy program and CLB 1, 2, new orientations for clients to accessing their learning in a digital medium in the CLB 3 and 4 classes, and support for instructors and clients throughout by our online mentors, our online support staff, and our head instructors, and as well the supervisors who have stayed in touch with all of these instructors and clients and have helped to move forward this new platform of learning. At the same time, gaps were highlighted in other areas, such as program inertia, slow response to some needs for training, and continual need for access to tech. Some tenets of the traditional language programs have had to be re-examined, some new ways tried, some old ways abandoned in order to meet our program outcomes, which is to say, to meet the needs of our clients. Diana, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you. So I have some questions here that I'm going to take a look at. Thank you so much, everyone, for submitting these questions. So the first one is, what do you think we can learn from your experiences regarding providing settlement services online? Oops, it just disappeared on me. Setsu or Tony, do you have anything you'd like to say to that?
Sorry, could you repeat the question one more time there, Diana?
Yeah. What do you think we can learn from your experiences regarding providing settlement services online? And if I can just say at MOSAIC, we definitely did a lot of what I like to call cross-pollination, which is doing as I think language instructors are very good at creating pieces for training, such as cheat sheets and different approaches, and we can summarize that very well. So a lot of our staff in the language program did some cross training for how to use things like Zoom and how to make an efficient and effective environment so that you can express this information whatever it is you're doing. So for the for the group sessions, I think this worked very well. Maybe there's some learnings from your one-on-one sessions for settlement, Tony or Setsu?
Well, I can speak a bit to the broader scale because we didn't have as many one-on-one sessions, but yeah, there's so much, it's hard to pin down a few, and we've mentioned so many over the past hour already. But I go back to this idea of flexibility and multi-layered support. So on the flexibility side, like I said, we found that some clients responded very well to online in our new platform, our new structure of programs, and some did not respond as well. Mm-hmm. So I think we really have to be open in the future to looking at different possibilities and looking at what works and giving our clients a range of options to meet them where they're at to best access services.
For sure.
And from the management side, I'd like to mention as well, you know, I said multi-layer, and I think I mentioned specifically instructors, online support staff, and head instructors and supervisors, all in my parts of the presentation. But I'd also like to acknowledge the, our manager and our director and the organization itself to being open to trying new things and new ideas. And I think that was an important learning for us, that we really have to look at different ways, and we have to be open at all levels of our organization to trying these different things and seeing what works.
Great. Okay, so moving on, we have another question. In your experience of using Moodle, did you find it to be user-friendly for instructors and students? I think Astrid, would you like to take that on?
Well, I think that any technology is user-friendly when you know how to use it, and it's not user-friendly the first time you try to figure it out. And so I think that choosing one platform and using it consistently through the levels, I think it creates a sense of uniformity, and it makes the tech learning curve a little bit it's easier, right? Because they know how to open a book. If you learn it in level 2 and then you move on to level 3, you still know how to open a book and use it. So it is, I think Moodle is a good tool. Is it, I mean, I think everything, it has its pluses and its minuses. It can be sometimes a little complicated, I guess, but overall, I think it's got many, many, many features that make it quite usable, I guess.
Right.
I don't know if that answered the
Yeah.
question.
And I think, Tony, you also took the approach of having kind of a two-pronged approach, like a richer Moodle environment and a more accessible Moodle environment.
That's right, Diana. And I don't think I could have put it any better than that, Astrid, as to the experience with Moodle, that it's always easy once you know it. So the simplified version really helped instructors who had not had a lot of exposure to that previously kind of scale up to a more fluency in the use of the platform, whereas our higher level instructors had already done Learn IT to Teach, so they had a bit of a head start when we started into the new program under COVID.
Great. So I think this question can probably be answered by a little bit by everyone here. It's a long one. So I teach level 1 and 2. How do you deal with PBLA? How do you deal with assessments? For students who can barely understand how to deal with some of the basic online homework. And then it goes on to say, do you feel Avenue is appropriate for level 1 and 2, given that students have never had any digital literacy classes first? So I don't know, Setsu, do you wanna give us your insights?
Sure. Oh, the question disappeared. Oh, there we go.
There it is.
So of course, like probably most of the country, PBLA was a really big pain point for all the instructors once we went online. It was a whole new way of doing things. So, for a while we were just kind of trying to get things done. We are back though to full-on PBLA, artifact collection, and the instructors are doing a lot of the work because we don't use Google Classrooms or anything like that. So we don't at the moment. For the level 1 and 2 and at ISANS, we don't have a way to like an online portfolio because, as I mentioned, we are doing one-on-one phone calls with their instructors. So the learners are sending pictures of their work to their teachers, and the teachers are kind of storing that away in in files for each of the learners for when we return to the classrooms. They do, because they meet one-on-one, the assessment is a little bit easier. We've done a lot of teaching around, what assessment should look like, meaning that your family isn't helping you and you don't have notes and that you do it independently. And like most instructors, they do know when work is completed by the learner and when it might be completed by somebody else. Yeah. So we're dealing with that as it comes along, but we have ramped back up to full PBLA implementation at the lower levels. And, never having any digital literacy classes first. As I said, we are not at ISANS, the 2s and 1s are not on Avenue or Moodle. So we are looking at getting there, as the one-on-one model we understand is not sustainable for the future. So if we want to go blended and keep the digital literacy skills that our learners have acquired, then we're going to have to look at that. So literacy is very, very limited on Avenue, and we do have a lot of concerns about how the learners are actually going to be able to access the platforms.
Right. I think at Mosaic, it was the same sort of approach. PBLA and assessments were not the priority at back in April, and we just slowly built it up. It's for the purposes of, allowing the students to get used to the remote learning program. I really can't say too much about Avenue. Perhaps, Tony, if you want to say something about if you've seen anything for level 1 or 2.
Sure. As Setsu said, we decided not to try and introduce
Right.
Avenue 2, or formerly EduLink, and now Avenue to level 1 or 2 yet. The content can be quite difficult for lower language levels to navigate, and also the pages themselves. Like you, for our higher levels, we kind of worked our way back up towards artifacts and assessments over the past 10 months. And so we are getting better at them, but our pace is still not the same as before. The Avenue has a new e-portfolio feature that has just come online. I think they worked out the last of the issues and started using it more consistently from December. So we're just starting to get some experience in that now.
Okay. So the next question is, what is the maximum amount of time you would recommend for, I assume this is for a synchronous session. So Astrid, why don't you pipe in and then we'll hear from ISANS.
I think it varies. I think there's a lot of variation in how long the synchronous session is. I don't recommend replacing a 3-hour class with a 3-hour synchronous session. I don't think it works that well. And if we are using Moodle and we have all these tools for listening and writing and building skill, then why not use them? So maybe an hour and a half would be good. Something like that, but it depends on the level and it depends on the teacher and their comfort with things. But I think we want to move away from having it just try to replace a normal class with a Zoom class, because it's not as effective as a more blended approach that does draw on the tools of the asynchronous environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I've seen that a lot of our lower level instructors have gone more to shorter sessions, but they prefer to meet more regularly or more often during the week, just so that everyone can, keep the focus and the engagement level up.
For us, this was one of the lessons that we were able to bring forward from our blended learning pilot pre-COVID closure, was that the full length classes of 2.5 hours for part-time or 5 hours for full-time was too much. So we recommended 30 minutes to an hour. Now, there would be occasions where you might want to go past that because you are working on a speaking skill, a speaking task, or a listening task with speaking that needed more interactivity. But for the most part, our instructors at CLB3 Plus are doing 30 minutes to an hour out of a 2.5 hour total learner time commitment each day for part-time, and double that for full-time.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go over to, did you have any issues using students' personal email addresses in online and blended learning? Did you issue all students with the same email account domain? So just speaking from our experience, because we did have our what we called parallel online classes, which was a place where our clients could review content at any time. Upon registration, we already had that procedure in place that students would provide their email addresses and we would enroll them into the Moodle platform. With the onset of the pandemic, that practice continued, and so we were grateful that we had that in place. And in terms of personal email addresses, again, that goes back to building that sense of community. So their classes are private, so it's just their teacher and their classmates. You know, they knew each other from before, and as new people register and are brought in, we work really hard to build that sense of community. So you know, there are some personal email addresses there, or personal information as well. You know, we do give guidance on, you know, this is an online platform, be careful, be aware, you know, cybersecurity, et cetera. But we also know that this is a community, and during the pandemic, there was an importance of building those connections with your classmates, which were often the only people outside of your family that you were interacting with. And so we used their own emails.
Yeah, we did not have that in place, unfortunately. Pre-pandemic, we had a lot of clients' emails, but not all. So when we first migrated clients over to our LMS, we had to do a little bit of a workaround because our LMS does require email addresses, and we didn't yet have the supports for clients to help them to create those addresses. Now it's part of our client orientation process, the one that I referred to in the presentation. If they don't already have an email address, they are assisted by our online support staff and our head instructors to create one, so that by the time they go into the classroom and it's time to enroll them into the Moodle classroom, that is in place. But we don't have capability to issue them an ISANS address, so they do use their own private emails in that case as well. And cybersecurity and digital is a part of digital literacy that is worked on incrementally, little by little, over time.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to zip on down to were the perceived impact on program outcomes percentages you shared based on teachers' responses to one questions, and how was the data collected?
Would you like us to start with that one, or would you like to go ahead?
I think that was part of one of your slides.
Okay. Ours, the data that we have already was conducted through a survey done internally to our staff. It was an anonymous survey, so we received all the results, but not with names or any personal identifiers attached to them. Now, that was the survey that the data is already reflected there, but Setso, I think, can speak a bit more to the current efforts and ongoing efforts that are underway to do a more detailed evaluation of outcomes and programs.
I guess again, what the evaluation committee, I guess, is reaching out to do focus groups. So it's not confidential. And there are many questions, actually, not just one, but just a lot of questions around service delivery and comfort levels and recommendations for the future, and the positives and the negatives, the good, bad, and the ugly, I guess. Yes, and so that went out to everyone, not just instructors, but as I said, we've surveyed instructors and clients and partners and, you know, our management team. So trying to get a different perspective, or I shouldn't say different, but the perspectives of everybody so that it can be taken into consideration moving forward.
Right, great. And just for us, our feedback surveys were all translated. So there was a question kind of dovetailing with this one. Was it too difficult to do these surveys with our learners? And just so that we don't have to deal with that, we do have them translated so that they can participate and give their feedback. I think we have time for one more, guys. So thank you for your presentation. In your communities, are there LINC learners who simply do not show up to online classes, even if registered? If so, how do you find them? And this is a question from Frank at CSS in Edmonton.
I can start us off on that one. And yes, there were, but through extensive efforts on the part of our administrative team, all clients who had not shown up or had not registered were followed up with extensively, sometimes using interpreter support as required, so that eventually we got a response from everyone as to whether or not they were going to continue with online learning or not. And there were some clients who decided, nope, it's not for me, or came to a few things and decided, nope, I want to wait till my class is going to be back in person. And that's perfectly okay. And we have lists with those clients on it so that when we can resume, as we actually already have started to do, we can invite them back to class and re-engage them in the program.
Great, thank you. So it turns out that I spoke too soon, and maybe we do have time for another question. If we haven't been able to answer your questions, you can see our contact information. We'd be happy to connect with you. So if you'd like to send some questions our way, please feel free to do so. And this is really the last one, guys. Were there any training tools and support systems created for instructors so they could easily adapt to the new tech-based environment?
Yes, definitely new tools, but there's no royal road to learning. It's always time and effort and a willingness to learn.
Astrid?
Internally, we had some videos, like we had teachers create videos of how they do things, because when one person figures it out, they can easily teach it to another, and it saves us a lot of headache, because trying to learn through YouTube is very difficult, and sometimes there's real gaps. If it is Moodle that you're interested in, Learn IT to Teach is good, or you could also go to Learn Moodle. I found their course very friendly and user friendly. It's not so intimidating. I think you have to be willing with tech to suck it up and try things. I don't think there's an easy way. You just have to watch YouTube until you learn. Yeah. Unfortunately, I spent a lot of Friday learning how to add voice to the PowerPoint, and it was tricky.
Yeah. In terms of support systems, I know that you worked very hard to create those lunch and learns and office hours, and the managers and the instructional developers, which are kind of our support coordinators, also worked to put those systems in place. So there's like a regular time when people could get support on any questions, and we have forums for different issues, Zoom, Moodle, tech. I'm not feeling good today. All of those things. Setsu?
Yes, I'd have to agree. We also have now a real robust repository of various videos that have been created on how to do everything. So right from making H5P to enrolling new learners, everything that you can think of that we've needed to do to implement this new method of programming. So every time we have a PD, and there's been lots, it's recorded and there are screencasts done, and everything has been saved so that it's there for instructors to access when they need it, or if we have any new instructors who are taking on a new assignment and starting into an area where they didn't previously teach before. We have even started creating videos for our learners that can be sent to them to remind them how to, well, just like some basic information of how to turn their screen around, or join a Zoom call, or a reminder about the attendance policy. Someone had mentioned about learners who don't show up. We have maintained, our 80% attendance requirement, and And it's been going really, really well. But we do have little videos that we can send them in their own language to tell them, don't forget, you know, you can only miss so many classes, or, you know, don't forget, next week you have to pick up your homework package on Tuesday or Wednesday. So certainly everything that we have been doing, we have tried to make it accessible for everybody moving forward as well.
Great. Thank you so much. So thank you so much, Setsu and Tony and Astrid for joining us today. And to everyone out there in at the conference, I'm sorry, at the virtual session, thank you so much. And to Pathways to Prosperity, thank you so much for hosting this event. And have a great day, everyone.